Welcome again to our dark discussion. This is number 13 in the series. Prophetic? Perhaps. Ellen Hart is here. She's the author of the Jane Lawless series, and so is our co-host Kent Kruger, who is author of the Cork O'Connor series. We're going to talk about a few things, and then we'll welcome a guest from Chicago, Libby Fisher-Hellman, a fine mystery author. First, let's get some definitions on the table. Mystery, thriller, crime fiction, differences, similarities?
You know, I think most mystery or crime writers like the overall...
Like an umbrella, you mean?
Sort of like an umbrella, yeah, be the umbrella and call it crime fiction. Mm-hmm. And then underneath that you've got all the subgenres, but I think directly underneath that you have two prongs, and one is mystery, and the other is thriller or suspense novel.
So you're saying that those are the two primary categories?
Yeah,
okay.
I am. That's the way I look at
all
it.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at it. Let me give you my definition of a thriller and a mystery, and then you all can weigh in on your own definitions. If I were going to write a mystery about the blowing up of my house in South Minneapolis, I would start with the blowing up of my house in South Minneapolis. It would be blown to pieces, and then the investigator would come in, the PI, the cop, whatever, and figure out by the end of the book who did it and why. Okay? Mm-hmm. Is there suspense or tension in a book like that? I think, yes. I think that's one of
It can certainly be handled in a way in which there's...
It's a tool that you have any writer has in their arsenal. But the difference between that and a thriller is that if I were going to write the same book about the blowing up of my house in Minneapolis, I would let everybody know at the beginning of the book that the house was going to be blown up. I would set the clock ticking, and from there it's a race. Is our hero or heroine going to be able to figure it out before the house blows up or not? And I think it's a fundamental difference between the two kinds of books.
I think there's another fundamental difference, and my take on it is this. In a mystery, typically speaking, if the writer's playing fair with readers, he or she is delivering to the reader the clues at the same rate that the protagonist is receiving them, so that the reader and the protagonist are on the same page in terms of what they know about what's going on.
True.
And if a reader is an astute reader, can solve the mystery at the same time, or usually a little before our protagonist does. Whereas in a thriller, the reader is usually ahead of the protagonist in what's known about what's going to happen. Very often the reader knows exactly that the house is supposed to blow up at the end of Ellen's book, and the question is, will the protagonist figure out what we know in time to keep the house from blowing up? Right. And it's the question, who done it, that fuels the mystery, and it's the question, will they be able to stop this horrendous thing? Right. That fuels the thriller.
So where does motive come in these two definitions then? What's the motive in the thriller that helps to drive the
I don't
tension?
think motive is the critical issue. I think they both have motives. I think the critical issue, at least from my standpoint, is that in a thriller you have this very, very loud ticking clock and this very, very obvious threat. Mm-hmm. It's what Hitchcock used to do. You know, if you like Hitchcock movies, he would, and he always said that he didn't feel like he was directing the actors in his movies as much as he was directing the audience. He would take you on into a room and pan the camera down, and you'd see that there was the bomb under the table, and then they'd come up, and you know people
and
were
you'd
playing.
see the timer saying you've got a minute before it blows up.
Well, I think it's interesting that you feel you have to use a motion picture image to define.
Yeah, it's so clear. But that's so clear in what Hitchcock did, I think.
Well, Hitchcock, no doubt about it, he was a real icon of the thriller motion picture. But I'm not so sure that applies across the board to any kind of a thriller. I'm always a little nervous about these labels, as you know I've said in the past.
You know, the truth is, particularly when you're talking thrillers and mysteries, the two weave in and out so much, because very often in a thriller you'll have an element that needs to be figured out by a protagonist and by the audience as well. Not necessarily everything is known, and there may be some key element that's hidden from the audience, and once it becomes clear, protagonists discover, you know, we move forward. And in a thriller and in a mystery, you're very often, particularly in modern mysteries, going to have that thriller-esque element to them that's a real visceral kind of gut-wrenching suspense because someone's in danger, and if you don't solve the mystery, someone's going to die.
Or several someones.
Or several someones.
Yeah, okay.
I do feel, I mean, I read a lot of books about directors because I think directors do a lot of the same things we do. And I also read a lot of books on
You mean movie directors and
movie
television
directors,
directors.
yeah. And I also read a lot of books on acting because I think actors do a lot of the same things we do as writers. I think there's an awful lot of overlap in the creative process.
Actors do the same thing that we do as writers. Explain that. That's interesting.
You know, when I teach, I often tell my classes to go out and get, was it Stanislavski's book on the method? Because when you're creating a character, or trying to create the layers of a character, you're doing very much the same thing that an actor is doing, and bringing something to the stage or to the screen.
Be a tree. Now tell me what kind of a tree you're going to be.
Oh, a tree.
Be a suspenseful tree.
I better be a good tree.
Or a thrilling tree.
I'm going to be a pine tree. This is Minnesota.
Jack pine, red pine,
I don't
white
know.
pine?
Don't know enough.
Okay, well, it's just, all right, but I wonder if, how does that relate to the technique of constructing the novel then, those two labels?
Of those two types of novels. I just think that when you're writing well, you write thrillers.
See, I think I write mysteries,
well,
but
you write
my publisher calls
mysteries.
them thrillers.
They're
And they
suspense
call them
novels.
thrillers because suspense is an enormous element of the work. But what really drives the novel is the mystery at the heart of
I
it.
agree.
What's going on?
I agree.
But I try to work in the knowledge, the reader's not to the, I try to give the reader the knowledge that unless Cork O'Connor figures this out, people are going to die. And that's where the suspenseful, thriller-esque
I
element
agree,
usually comes
because
in.
you don't write, and very often I think thrillers, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I think very often thrillers do have somewhat, they don't really spend a lot of time on characterization. They spend a lot more time on the plot, on how to give you this woo ride up and down.
Well, they're very plot-driven. These days they're very techno-driven. Many of the thrillers rely on a lot of technological know-how and all of that stuff. And I have to be really honest with you. I appreciate mysteries more than I appreciate thrillers because I like the puzzle element very much, which I think is a more intelligent approach.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that mysteries, in my estimation, at any rate, my humble opinion, deal more with character. Really deal more with deeper, more realistic motives.
Deal with the
what's going on.
human element much
Bingo.
more than.
So are
yeah.
there thrillers out there where the characters are well
There are,
developed
but you know what?
What?
We're not going to discuss that right
Okay.
now.
Another time.
Another
Okay.
time and another place. So we're clear on that, right? Now we're going to take a quick break. And next up, mystery author Libby Hellman goes one-on-one with Mr. Kruger. Well, I lied. I'm still here. Ellen's still here. And now Libby's here, and so is Kent, who's going to start our introductions. Mr. Kruger.